Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the Afghan and international community. Now what needs to be done? Obviously the UNGA is going on, and interestingly we have heard from the American president, from the Chinese president, we have heard from the Iranians, and now the interesting part is that everybody wants that there should be a proper broad-based inclusive government in Afghanistan, and to quite some extent the local authorities or the decision makers in Kabul, they have agreed to it. Now the mechanism that needs to be sorted out, though even despite the fact that there was an extension in the cabinet of the Afghan government, or the interim government as you call it, interestingly still there is no woman there. In the previous government there were just 3. But still the entire world is in fact focusing on this particular fact about the women rights and their inclusion in the government. Now since there is another very interesting story that the acting Afghan envoy has also spoken to the special envoys of Pakistan and the Chinese as well as the Russians. So that is something pretty important. In Pakistan, if you remember, there was this interview of the Prime Minister Imran Khan that was given to BBC, in which he very categorically mentioned that if the global community is not going to help the Afghan interim regime or the government, whatever you may call it, there is going to be some dire consequences. There is going to be something pretty serious, and that is going to take the entire region into something which won't be that easy to sort out. Because when you talk about Afghanistan, interestingly after 40 years peace has returned, and proper peace hasn't returned even so far, because there are a lot of non-state actors like Daesh or IS, or you talk about the TTP for that matter. There has been a lot of explosions, there has been a lot going on, and interestingly a lot of civilians also lost their life. Not talking only about the bomb blast that occurred in the month of August, when there was this explosion that killed around 200 people, including 13 US soldiers as well. But there was again another blast, 7-8 precious lives were lost in Jalalabad. Now this needs to come to an end, and what can the global community do? That is a $1 million question. What should be the role of the Chinese, the Russians and the neighboring countries? Because again, I'll refer to the Prime Minister's statement that he believes that the neighboring countries can play a very major role, but we cannot say that the role of the Americans that's been eliminated. They have a very important role, and they should stick to what they had earlier committed to. Now before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a package. Let's watch that.
After 40 years of external military invasions in Afghanistan, the land of the war-torn country is now becoming a challenge for the current and the future world order. The exit of the United States without reconciliation and rebuilding Afghanistan has not only compromised its hegemonic position in the international arena, but also created an opportunity for a new great game in South Asia. Pakistan, since the Kabul fall, is treading its foreign policy in the directions which are vital for its own as well as the regional strategic interests. Hence, Pakistan remained emphasizing world powers not to leave Afghan citizens alone, deprived of the basic living necessities. Moreover, while utilizing its strategic position, Pakistan remained assertively engaged in making Afghanistan a prosperous country. Prime Minister Imran Khan's reply of absolutely not regarding clearing the United States' strategic mess in Afghanistan and not acting as a hired gun for the United States has amplified its clear message of promoting interdependence and multilateralism in the international arena. The congruency of the multilateralist approach of Pakistan with China and Russia's interdependent Eurasian dream and making Afghanistan a constructive partner in the regional economic interdependence and prosperity is now progressing in the realistic directions. In the recent interview with BBC, Prime Minister Imran Khan reiterated that Pakistan will accept and recognize the Taliban's government only if the Taliban will succeed in making an inclusive government. The meeting of Pakistan, Russia, and China's special envoy on Afghanistan, including Ambassador Sadiq, Zamir Kabulov, and Yu Zhajong, respectively, in Kabul with Afghanistan's acting Prime Minister Mullah Hassan Akhund, will prove to be a very decisive step in making the region truly interdependent and growth conducive for all the stakeholders.
Now, to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Air Vice Marshal retired IJAZ Malik Saab, Hilal Imtiaz. He's a senior analyst, political commentator. Sir, thank you so much for your time, sir. And we also have with us Imran Khan Saab, who doesn't need any, I would say, introduction, but the gentleman is a known columnist, is a senior journalist. Thank you so much, Imran, for your time as well. And on Skype, we have with us Dr. JAMIL Khan Saab, former ambassador, senior diplomat. JAMIL Khan Saab, pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time as well. But let me start off from you, IJAZ Malik. Now, if you look at the interview given to the BBC, sir, the recent one by our Prime Minister Imran Khan Saab, he very categorically mentioned about few, I would say, facts. And those facts also include that the regional players, and especially the neighbors of Afghanistan, they are supposed to play a very vital role. That also includes Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, you talk about Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China, and obviously the Russians have their own interest. Now, sir, there seems to be a direct conflict of the narratives as far as the West and the East is concerned. And a lot of people used to say that the Americans, they've lost their war, they ran away. But sir, America at the end of the day is a superpower. They have their own agenda, and they would never live with this fact that they've lost a war. Whatever the reality is, it's a different ballgame altogether. But sir, this area, it seems to me that it is going to remain in this turmoil for quite some time, as long as the Western support isn't there. Will you agree with this statement, sir?
Exactly, I would agree, Faisal. And before we talk further on this, I must appreciate Prime Minister Imran Khan's very candid and very realistic stance on all these major issues. And he replied, the questions, very tricky questions, which were difficult to handle, I would say. But he very calmly and with his conviction that he has about Pakistan's national security and foreign policy, I think he handled it very well. We must appreciate that. Having said that, you see, America has created a vacuum because the superstructure that they have built over 20 years after their intervention in Afghanistan, that has collapsed because it was nothing beyond parameters or very secured fortresses around and in and around Kabul or a few major cities. And after the Taliban, they started to march towards these objectives, they just fled. So virtually there wasn't any substantial functional government institutions over there. So if the entire world, there were 56 countries in the NATO alliance, in ISAF, if they could unite together under banner of USA to wage a war for 20 years against a country which had no direct involvement in 9/11, isn't it their responsibility now to come forward and support that country to get out of this turmoil and head towards stability, which is a guarantee of stability in this entire volatile region? So I think whatever, there are 3-4 major points that Prime Minister have raised, I think they need to be followed. And but while America would remain involved directly or indirectly, they are pursuing their objectives and through their proxies like India, who claim to be a neighbor of Afghanistan, whereas they have nothing in common, no geographic contiguity with Afghanistan. But I think they would not, given the policies and the background of President Biden, they would not substantially contribute towards rebuilding of Afghanistan. So ultimately the responsibility would come on the regional powers, that is Russia, China, and Pakistan has to play a very positive and major role in that.
I totally agree with you on that, but sir, one quick comment and then I'll move to Imran Khan Sahab, and that is about the intention, sir, because intention is something very important. Actions are different, intentions are different. Sometimes there is an alignment, sometimes it is just a show off. Do you believe that the West has proper intentions to bring in peace in the region, sir?
Personally, I would doubt, because after Cold War era, they have evolved. They have developed their own threats, worked hard on media. They've tried to create regional or local conflicts all over the world, particularly in the Southeast Asia and Middle East, because their economy runs on defense production. So peace anywhere in the world does not suit America, so to say. So I don't think so that they are really serious. I mean, optics and cosmetic leaving aside, it suits them to have regional conflicts or small conflicts which are going on after which they have.
Obviously, somebody has to feed the huge military industrial complex in the United States of America, sir. You know the kind of strength that particular, I would say, institution has all over the world.
Yes, you see now the people
they
have started.
Dictate the American
People
president.
have, in the if you had followed the debate in the Congress over there, where the foreign the Secretary of State was answering the questions to the committee member on this conflict and this latest development, they were grilling him over the policies, and ultimately they were questioning where that trillions have gone, or the daily spending of multi-millions have gone, and it has actually not been penny.
Sir, there was another case of missing $2.2 trillion. Imran Saab would know better, and the entire documentation and everything was in Pentagon, and that particular area that was hit by that missile or a plane, whatever that was. The interesting part is that some conspiracy theories do have some relevance also. Now, Imran Saab, that is going to be a different chapter if we get to that side. But having said that, now looking at the current situation, I feel that there are certain forces, including America, including India, and perhaps their allies, they really want that the Taliban regime should fail, and should fail at all costs. There should be some sort of an infighting, and there should be a civil war-like chaos, and everything should be destabilized once more. This is what the agenda seems like, so that the fallout factor, whether it's on Iran or on Pakistan or even on Russia, it suits the West, sir. This is primarily a part of their agenda. So why would they support the Afghan regime or the government of the Taliban, or why do we seek for some sort of a financial support from them or otherwise? At the end of the day, it's the mess that is close to us, and we need to take care of it. If your house, is unfortunately is in the line of fire, so it is your responsibility to create the defensive setup. Otherwise, nobody is going to come from 8,000 miles away and look after your affairs.
So there is every incentive, every reason that the United States would want for the region to remain destabilized. One of the main reasons, as AVM Saab also mentioned, is the issue of the military-industrial complex. The real winner in this war was the weapons manufacturers. Whoever side emerged victorious, Taliban or the United States, both sides were buying and using weapons. So whoever is selling weapons, they're the real winners in Afghanistan. Secondly, a peaceful and clean and clear Afghanistan paves the way for China to have access to the European market, which is the One Belt, One Road plan that they have. Only a destabilized Afghanistan can block that. Of course, India would never want Afghanistan to be peaceful. India would never want the Taliban to rise, because their presence has completely died in Afghanistan, because triumph of Taliban means the death of their interest in Afghanistan. So Indians would never want that. Now, the United States will be making a big mistake if they would completely abandon the Taliban and let Afghanistan, become another chaos, because they saw what happened in Syria, they saw what happened in Iraq, in Libya. All the strong men that were there, Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Bashar al-Assad is still there, but with the fall of those guys, the countries became even a much more mess than it was before. At least when those guys were in charge, it was stable to an extent. The countries were stable. Now it's a much more mess. ISIS was created because of the mess there, because of the U.S. aggression in Afghanistan, in Iraq. So the U.S. will be making a big mistake for its own peace in the long term if they just let Afghanistan fall, if they do not support Taliban. The other incentive that they will have on the flip side is, if they want to support Taliban, they will do only with the hopes of flipping them to their side. You know, they know, like I said, they saw in those countries, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, they saw that when they lose their guy who's in charge, they cannot do anything then. They have to send in the bad guys like General Khalifa Haftar in Libya and other such people. So to avoid that situation, to avoid sending expensive Blackwater style mercenary armies, it is much cheaper to have the local guys work for you, such as the Taliban, and give them money and weapons. I'm not saying that the Taliban will sell themselves, but that's their only hope that they can cling to, the Americans. And so again, if they would be supporting Taliban, it would be in hopes of only that. And it doesn't look very good for the United States right now. First of all, they don't even have the kind of economy to keep supporting them. Secondly, they have their own domestic issues. The pandemic is killing a lot of Americans. The inside hatred, you know, between the white supremacists and everybody else is also breaking America apart. So there's a lot of internal issues that are there right now that President Biden has to focus on. I doubted that the United States will come back to Afghanistan anytime soon. In the meantime, Afghanistan, as they always like to say, will be lost. They always like to ask the question, who lost Afghanistan? And Afghanistan was as if other countries are their property. You know, that's a question they always like to pose. Afghanistan is already lost. And if China makes the investments, if Pakistan plays its positive role, it's a win-win for both the countries, not just Afghanistan and China, but for Pakistan also. A peaceful Afghanistan, as we always say, means a peaceful Pakistan. So it's a win. It can be a win-win for Pakistan if Afghanistan becomes peaceful. But of course, spoilers, as Zalmay Khalilzad had been saying for a year now, spoilers such as India and the war hawks in Washington, D.C. will always be working in the shadows to destabilize this region. So the only job Pakistan has and China has right now is to keep an eye for that and make sure Afghanistan becomes.
Now, at the end of the day, you know, it seems that Pakistan really has to keep that equilibrium, the West and the East. And that balancing factor is going to be something really important, because that is where I think everything lies. I mean, you talk about the foreign policy, and I'll take this question to the gentleman on Skype with us, Ambassador Dr. Jamil Khan Saab. Dr. Saab, obviously, when we talk about this foreign policy management, let me put this way, and the foreign management, it's all about making more friends, reducing the number of your enemies, you know, converging your interests, and trying to minimize the areas where you have some sort of conflict, perhaps, or where you do not agree on one particular agenda. Now, sir, foreign policy will play the key role, no matter what Pakistan does as far as the economy of Afghanistan is concerned or otherwise, because whether we like it or we don't, Pakistan is always looked upon through the prism of Afghanistan and sometimes from the lens of the Indians. And unfortunately, they have been the adversaries, whether we like it or we don't. And that's how the world gauges us and engages us. Your take, sir.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, if we do not very effectively and very aggressively implement the foreign policy, which is drawn by the leadership, of course, and from time to time, perhaps the leadership had their own priorities, and the foreign policy could not be in commensurate with the requirements of the region or the world. And my indication is that we have not been able to counter the impression which is being created and which has been created before also, that Pakistan has been supporting Taliban, and it's basically because of Pakistan that Taliban have been able to come in power again. And this is what is being discussed, and this is how the Blinken, the foreign secretary, in front of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Congress, was being grilled on the other day. So all what they discuss and what they write in their own think tanks, the United States and some other countries, now that has to be addressed through a very orchestrated policy, foreign policy, which is to be implemented by the Foreign Office. Now, are we doing that? In fact, the challenges are enormous. Challenges are so huge that the infrastructure of implementing tools is not as strong, as robust, or as resourced, I would say. And because of which, perhaps we are not being able to, in its proper way, I would say. Otherwise, the challenges are being met in its proper way. We've been able, not been able to counter those impressions. And having said so, now the biggest challenge has come under the backdrop of Afghanistan. As you said, that Pakistan is being seen from the prism of Afghanistan. So Afghanistan has become a focus, and you might have noticed that last couple of speeches by the head of states and other head of governments in General Assembly, or each one of them have indicated and mentioned about Afghanistan. Now, coming over to this very fact that Afghanistan, the Taliban's success in Taliban, if they don't succeed, what is going to be the implication? Of course, Pakistan is going to be the biggest sufferer, but is the world is also going to be biggest sufferer. I was hearing our other two August members of the panel and the destabilization. Yes, but destabilization goes against the interest of the United States and the Western countries if it goes out of hand. They would like a destabilization, which they call controlled destabilization, because destabilization they can't afford destabilization in Afghanistan. If that happened, then there are a lot of literature available in their own media, in their own newspaper and think tanks, and from their own Congress, that if it destabilizes, I'll quote you only two examples. One is the director of the intelligence who says that Afghanistan can become the home ground of Al Qaeda and some of the other terrorist groups again. And the deputy director of the CIA also, while giving a statement, has said the same thing. So if it goes to that extent, then obviously Americans are worried about that only. So far as their own self is concerned, look at what they have done. I've seen the state of affair of Somalia. I've been in charge. I've been a country head in Kenya and Somalia, so I can very much visualize how they left Somalia, and I know how they left Syria and Iraq and what is happening in Libya. So it's not a very success story for the for USA. But if we discuss about Taliban, there is huge amount of criticism on Joe Biden. And it is said that during the midterm election, this would impact and they may not be able to win those many seats. That's a side apart. But now they are trying to find a scapegoat. Now they are trying to tell their own people, their own population, that why they did not succeed as much. Although Joe Biden and the foreign minister and the other cabinet members, they are claiming that they've been able to achieve their targets, achieve their goals. And those are that they've been able to undermine the capability of Al Qaeda, and therefore now the Western countries and America is safe. But their think tanks and their other policymakers, ex-retired and the serving, they have this indication that in case Afghanistan becomes destabilization, that boils down to one point. The Geneva meeting has pledged $1.2 billion of aid, and 664 million has been from the flash appeal of the United States. So that means the world would have no other choice but to really support Taliban, because the
So when you
way
say the world has no other choice, I mean, let's explain. What is this world supposed to mean, sir? Americans can spend and make trillions. After spending trillions in Afghanistan, few people got richer, and we all know, I mean, just go through the stock markets, go through certain companies, I mean, like Boeing or McDonnell Douglas and so on and so forth. I mean, the military industrial complex, I mean, these are the people who made money, and look at the amount which was spent, and now it's multiplied like many folds, sir. So it tells us that whatever is shown is perhaps not what reality is all about. So why would they care, sir?
Well, they care. They would care because Afghanistan, if they don't get any support, A, that it will again become a country which could become a safe haven for the terrorist groups, including Al Qaeda and other groups. Now that's one, and that ultimately is going to impact the Western countries. So let's view it in two parts. One is the Western countries and their allies, and second is the regional countries, the members of the SCO, the members of ECO, and this very part of the world. So the Western part of the world definitely is, they are not worried about Afghanistan. They would definitely like that there should be a controlled destabilization because they want to circumvent, they want to really sabotage the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative of China and CPEC. So therefore, they would like that controlled destabilization. But at the same time, they would not like it uncontrolled. If it happens, then billions of dollars of the drug trade would just start going, as it has happened in past, into those countries and would start impacting, number one. Number two, the terrorist group would then again be able to, according to the assessments, would be able to be having the potential, enough potential to carry out the operation in those countries. For these two reasons, they are worried. And that's why the resolution passed in European Union was 536 votes were in favor of the resolution and only 96 votes were against it while they were discussing about Afghanistan and how to keep Afghanistan stable. So that is one part. The second part, in United States also, they would only come for this very purpose, that Afghanistan should remain under the controlled destabilization and not under the uncontrolled. Having said so, if we review the Security Council resolutions of 9th September, what all demands they made, and if we take a look at the outcome of the National Security Committee of our own country, and we also look at the other statements, you'll find there are common features. And those common features are all-inclusive government, which Prime Minister Imran Khan has just said yesterday and previously. Also, we are also supporting that all-inclusive government plus the participation of the women plus the women right, children right. So all those things are part of the Security Council resolution, part of the outcome of the National Security Committee of ours, and so many. So therefore, we also have a common ground. Now, the problem is the trust deficit. The Western countries, they feel that Taliban wait and see policy and see what way they are going to. I have been in United Nations in East Timor. The initial government, which was formed by Shanana Gozma, who was the freedom fighter for about 25 years,
Correct.
First cabinet which was made was only comprised of the freedom fighters. Now, Taliban had also done it. That there have been reports on it. There have been analysis on it. Talibans have done it in the second go. They have now included a few more. They have said that they are going to do it all-inclusive and would not let the Western powers to have an excuse to continue with that.
All right. I'll just get back to you, Ambassador. I'll just get back to you on a quick comment and I'll come back to you.
You can just come after me. I just want to respond to what he said. I just want to
go ahead then. Go ahead.
We always see that people always say that the United States is worried about how Afghanistan should not become safe haven for the terrorists, and I don't know, people may disagree, but I always found that argument to be completely BS-filled lies. 9/11 did not happen because 9/11 happened for two reasons. The ideological reason which the United States provided to Al-Qaeda by invading countries, by occupying lands, by supporting Israel, by bombing Somalia and other countries.
I totally agree. Listen, do you believe that 9/11, that event, that has totally changed or rather transformed the entire globe, sir? This war on terror phenomena, this came out later.
It definitely has.
Well, what I'm saying, that don't you think this was perhaps a very well orchestrated and planned event, primarily to achieve the long-term objectives of the Americans?
Exactly.
Because Americans have not fought any war other than the war of independence on their soil. The attack on the Pacific Fleet before they bombed the Japanese was again,
Technically
you
not
know,
part of the US at
no,
the
no, no,
time.
exactly. You know, that wasn't a part, but still, I mean, why? They really wanted that to happen so that they could move on. And 9/11, I mean,
But
we all know.
even Faisal, if you give them the benefit of doubt and say, that, okay, Al-Qaeda did, it happened exactly as your official narrative is, logistically 9/11 happened because the CIA kept quiet over the people who were already in the United States. The two bombers, the two people, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdar, they were in Los Angeles in January 2000, the year 2000. 18 months before 9/11 happened, the CIA knew about their plan. The CIA knew why they were there. They went to flying schools learning how to fly, and every time they would say, we want to learn everything, we just don't want to learn how to land the plane. The CIA was reported that. The teacher at the school said, these guys, these Arabic guys, do not want to learn how to land the plane. Something is wrong. The CIA kept quiet again, did not let the FBI know. So logistically, 9/11 happened because they kept quiet. Again, another 9/11 did not happen because the United States occupied Afghan land. I don't ever understand when people say Afghanistan should not become a safe haven for the terrorists. You think Al-Qaeda is going to need a land in Afghanistan to plan attack and then they're going to be successful?
Sitting in those mountains and the caves?
So. Yeah, they're going to fly those planes from there. Is that what you mean by saying not giving the land to
4
them?
planes being hijacked at the same time almost.
Yes.
And one ends up in Pentagon, 2 in those buildings, if they were the planes.
Right, if you give
Because
them the benefit of doubt.
If they were the
if you
planes,
accept their narrative.
and look at the number of people who died. I mean, because I have been doing this research, because that was the time when I decided to get into journalism, to be very honest, exactly 20 years ago. So my major, case study was 9/11. And AVM Saab, the most interesting part was, you've been a pilot yourself and you know how it works, that just going through like a hot butter knife through the pack of butter. It doesn't happen that way. Secondly, sir, the buildings do not exactly fall. What about the building number 8? And then on top, sir, do you think the plane can attain that kind of a speed being at such a lower level, sir? Because when we talk about, let's say 35,000 feet, that there's thin air so that it can go faster. I mean, does it make sense to you? I mean, that is, I'm sorry to say, that is going to be a very different chapter, but what I'm saying is, sir, in order to achieve the global supremacy, there were certain, I would say, events which were planned and designed and later on performed in just an immaculate way, supported by the biased media, and that was a time when we all got to know about CNN also. Sir, do you think the Americans would like to bring in peace after the entire chaos where they spent trillions?
I would like to disagree partially with our worthy ambassador, Dr. Sahib, because there is nothing practically in such a land and with such a volatile situation. Even if they have planned for a controlled destabilization, Faisal, beyond a certain point, there is nothing like control. Then it is a dynamics change. It's a snowball effect. So if they want it to be destabilized, they would not have control beyond certain point. And Prime Minister Imran Khan has said very rightly that we have to see just beyond today. There is an emerging humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. So the world, and particularly the regional powers, they must react as fast as possible to stop that thing happening. And another issue why I would say that America would not like stability. You see, whenever you go to any operations or war, there is a war plan and then there is an exit strategy. What was the exit strategy for America? They have been here for 20 years. For past so many years, they were not actively engaged in any conflict. Not conflict, but there were no fighting going on in Afghanistan for many years now. So what was their exit strategy? The mere fact, this is an indication, the kind of military hardware that they have left. What was the denial plan for that kind of hardware? It was writing on the wall that sooner or later it will be in the hands of Taliban. So if they wanted, they could have put a very well articulated denial plan, and rather India was till late India was trying to replenish their ammunition. So what for? To fight against whom? So probably these all indicators signify that they want a destabilized region, because the Belt and Road Initiative, the access to the CIS states, containment of China, which is a post Cold War, it is a major cornerstone.
Now, Biden in his address yesterday said that they are not in favor of any sort of a Cold War. He repeated it, but sir, the Cold War has already started. I mean, this Quad, I mean, the first meeting once Biden took charge was about Quad.
Exactly.
The virtual meeting, and then you talk about this AUKUS. What is this supposed to mean,
Whether
sir?
the world reacts the way it is supposed to react or not, but virtually the world has been divided, among the American allies, and on the other side the regional powers, China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, or India to some extent. They are trying to create a role for themselves.
Sir, if I may put another question here. If you look at the past, let's talk about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, sir. And we all witnessed what happened. I mean, there's a list of events that we can talk about. But sir, to cut the long story short, that was the beginning, or rather the end of the Cold War. I mean, the Cold War started way back in 50s, late 50s, I would say. But sir, this was the end of that Cold War era, and they were one-on-one through Pakistan. So we played a role between two giants, two superpowers, and eventually one got disintegrated, and Americans became the sole superpower, right, sir? And they left even then, they left even now. Now there is another Cold War that has started, whether these top movers and shakers admit or not, but there is a Cold War going on between China, trade war, Cold War, or whatever war you may call it, or the tensions that are there, in certain spots in the South China Sea, or even in the, the kind of hurdles that have been created for BRI also by the Americans. Sir, once again, we will be a part and parcel of that Cold War. So what sort of a future do you see, sir? Where do we stand now, and where do you see us standing, say, in another 15, 20 years from now?
It all depends the way we pursue our foreign policy objectives, because this is a very dynamic subject. Pakistan has to have a very cautious approach, and as Prime Minister mentioned, the world must give time for Afghanistan to get stabilized and make those environment enabling for them, and Pakistan should also follow the same policy. And so far, I think our establishment, our government, our institution, the Foreign Office, they have handled very well. And I think if they continue with that cautious policy, Pakistan should take some advantage out of this situation. Rather than becoming a part of the problem, we should be part of the solution.
I think we should be a part of the solution. We are actually a part of the solution. Last closing comments from you, Ambassador Saab. Now, if Zabihullah Mujahid is sent as an ambassador of Afghanistan to United Nations, or perhaps this concept of a regime transforms into an interim government, accepted to some extent, not recognized, accepted to some extent by the foreign forces or the major decision makers, I would say, do you see this government taking charge in another 5 to 6 months from now, sir, things would get settled? Or you believe that this year, 2021, is going to be very crucial, because this is going to either make it or break it? Your take, sir.
Well, that's true. Definitely, it's either make it or break it. But the multilateralism, lateral diplomacy is going on. I'm sure this bloc is very strong where we are located. And Western country, the way they are pledging their funds, they have to really release it. And the Americans, which they have been able to seize $9 billion of Afghanistan, they'll have to do that. But before I proceed further, let me just make a very passing comment that I've seen Somalia and Al-Shabaab and the breeding ground. I've seen Yemen. I've been deployed from the United Nations side as a country head of the United Nations. And I've seen that also, the way the breeding ground, it starts becoming a breeding ground for such like organization. So world is basically, my indication was towards that side. That is one, but that very true. We all agree, I guess, that it's basically to give a tough time to China in terms of their BRI ambition and the goal. But we are we are a part and parcel of it. 16,000 nautical miles is going to be reduced to 5,000 by road journey, and strategically so important. Leaving this thing over here, yes, Afghanistan, they have their sovereign right, and they have nominated their ambassador in the United Nations. United Nations has a committee for the accreditation of such nomination. I guess they would ratify that, and he should be able to put across his point. Regarding the next 6 months or next 1 year, yes, it's make it or break it. If the world does not support, and Pakistan, of course, has given a very clear and candid, our Prime Minister has given a very clear and candid opinion and policy about it, and that's what our foreign policy is now, that we will definitely engage with them, and we would also emphasize on the all-inclusive government, and Pakistan, the supports that they need, a complete support, and the funding what is needed to be given to them. And if that not happens, then of course Afghanistan would then swirl around the destabilization side, which is detrimental to the regional as well as the world community. And therefore, Afghanistan, this country, Pakistan is in a very precarious situation. If we leave multilateralism and totally side with the bloc where we are located, the members of SCU and ECU and China, Russia, this bloc, then in that case, we have over $111 billion external debt and about 43 trillion rupees altogether, internal and external debt. We are taking loan just to discharge our interest on the loan. So our national security is mainly vulnerable because of our economic problems. But otherwise,
I think, sir, it is going to take a lot of time. It is going to take a lot of effort, provided if everything remains constant, only then we can move forward, because there will be a lot of challenges, a lot of problems, a lot of hindrances, a lot of hurdles in the way of Pakistan. But we can only hope and pray, and provided we make sure that the short-term goals, the medium-term goals, and the long-term objectives, they all should be in alignment. That's the way forward. But last
Just one
30
more
seconds, sir.
Yes, you just mentioned President Biden said that there is no Cold War. I think he has amnesia, because when he was ending the Afghanistan war and the case he was making to his people, he said superpower rivalry is the next major threat that the United States faces, and climate change also. So I don't know what is superpower rivalry. That's exactly what Cold War, that's what he's talking about. And then he says there is no Cold War. So he has amnesia. He said that like a few weeks ago.
Well, sir, let's see. Interesting times ahead. But anyway, thank you so much, Imran Khan Saab. AVM Saab, was a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much. And Abbas Saab, thank you so much for your time as well, sir. And that's all we have for this, sir. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.